we had lacked a little bit of visual interest tonight, so I put the infinite regression screen of backwards body doubling to see if body doubling works if you're watching someone else. That's absolute nonsense. Body doubling is actually, you make a task easier by watching someone else do the same task in the same room with you, or who cares? Just get to the story. Alright. Brett and Leslie, Chapter 8. Oh, and I've been asked whether this is a true story and who Brett and Leslie are. It's a semi-true story. Brett and Leslie are fake names for some roommates I used to have, neither of whom came to a very good end. And I've also had questions about the Blobwick info dump. I've had so many bizarre and mendacious and psychotic, actually psychotic is too flattering. I've had too many messed up characters in my life to really feel like I can jump in the deep end. So I thought back and backtracked a number of years to when I was 21, and I had just the worst cast of roommates you can, well, I suppose I'm alive, so they weren't the worst cast of roommates that you can possibly imagine, but one of the worst I've ever heard of. The thing is, I was 21, and that was a long time ago, so I don't remember 100% of what happened. I don't think I remember enough to make it a coherent story. So I had to fictionalize so much that this is basically a novel. So yes, it's based on some true people and true events, and there are a couple of key events that just are ripped straight from real life. But I had to fictionalize so much, and frankly, a lot of the cast is too dead to help me fact check that it's a novel, but it's a novel that's more heavily based on real life than most novels. So, and just to make it more fun, I won't tell you which parts are real, you can just guess, although it may be obvious. Some of the things that happen to me are so weird I can't make them up. Maybe the most mundane parts are probably the parts I made up. Anyway, as I said, I don't have much time, so I'm just dragging this out as long as possible in order to make things difficult for myself, I suppose. Alright, just making sure the camera's on so I don't have to start all over. Yeah, Brett and Leslie, Chapter 8. The next morning, I thought about putting my plan into action. After yesterday, I was in a rare state of content. I slowly twirled the bullwhip we kept in the front room around my calves and drank a single morning beer. I felt sexy, which was rare. It was a good morning, and it was a great beer. I can still remember that lukewarm, perfect bottle. I called the drinking thereof my why I drink moment for years, till I realized that one good moment isn't enough. It felt priceless, and yet, even at the time, it felt like another prelude to a metaphobia. The golden, sweet feeling I got out of that single beer is something I'll always cherish, because the way it hit, it felt so angelically good. It reminded me of that feeling's existence. I could see dust motes playing in the warm morning sunbeam. I smacked my lips and thought, this is why I drink. Thus the name. But even at the time, I knew the deeper reason was darker, because otherwise I could not enjoy the irrational, grinning, repulsive self-belief it takes in order to do anything, much less let Smacky T. Clown take a cigarette out of your teeth with a bullwhip and you aren't even getting paid. It's not liquid courage, it's liquid fluid delusion. The flat-headed, invincible entitlement that most of you goblins seem to get out of the box. I had to get it from a bottle. Without beer, I wouldn't know what it felt like. I would have never been an adolescent. Sometimes I catch myself thinking that I am the most profoundly misfit human being I have ever met. And then I remember I'm still alive. Sure, I knocked out most of my front teeth doing WWF-style tag team mud wrestling a few years later. But my tag team partner, Oh, poor Smacky. Have I introduced you to Smacky yet? He's the reason we kept a bullwhip in the front room. He had all his painting gear clogging his closet of a bedroom, so he had no place to crack the whip in there. Why, poor Smacky? Sure, Smacky T-Clown, official painter roommate to the house. There's always one. Was a grade A, Iowan-born, meth-head alcoholic asshole, barring the brief period when he was my AA sponsor. But goddamn, that boy was not made for these times, and he didn't last long. I met him at work, where he was a fairly showy line cook with a special talent. None of us could tell that he was always drunk. He kept that secret till 2 decades later when he was dying. He got away with so many shenanigans, he was a genius in a way. You wish he had put all that cleverness into his paintings, but I still wish I had a painting to help me remember him. We were working out a trade when his liver transplant gave up in disgust when he was 42. Yeah, as I mentioned, he's an asshole. God's bless him. Sorry, was an asshole. A slightly less outrageously entitled drunk, or, I don't know, cancer victim, could have wrung several decades out of that second liver. But I know Smacky, he meant well. He really meant well. Till he was out of the hospital with a brand new liver, and then it was like breaking into Dad's liquor cabinet for the first time all over again. Back in those innocent days, we hadn't started mud wrestling yet. Our relationship as artistes was in its embryonic form. Our only prop now curled around my legs like a snake as I replayed the day before and the day ahead. The bullwhip. Smacky bought the 9-foot leather whip as part of his plan B. If painting didn't work out, he was going to be a circus freak. Plan B died when he accidentally ripped his scrotum trying to lift weights with it, so all he had left of that dream was the bullwhip. Our routine was not that interesting, except that I could have been blinded. When we were drunk watching a show at O'Kay's and a band had an occasional delay, they'd let us crawl on stage. I would put a cigarette in my mouth, and he would pick it out with a bullwhip. Ta-da. After a few years, this undiagnosed cry for help morphed into becoming WWF-style tag team mud wrestling partners. Don't ask. It's one of many things I remember doing, but not why or how. I even remember how the combination of clay, metal, and chicken guts smelled when they put me in the meat-thawing sink after being covered in mud in Wisconsin in December gave me hypothermia. What I forget is why on earth I kept on getting in the mud anyway. I think I met Paul the asshole through Smacky, come to think of it. That gang that moved here from Iowa together. They all hated each other, but you couldn't peel them apart. They had bonded over bathtub meth, back when it was strictly a dead-end rural drug. But while Smacky was popular with the ladies and the gays, despite his weird relationship with his sugar mama wife, who was experimenting with having a wife herself that year, Paul had to have known, at some level, that he, on the other hand, was merely a roof over Yali's head outside her parents' house, and that carrying a skateboard a few blocks a day is never going to build a physique that can distract the eye from your root vegetable head. And this is how the camera rotates back to Paul. Skipping Brett again. Phew. Brett is relieved, and yet annoyed. And how Paul ruined my big plans. Because this was when I got cocky. Okay, maybe it sounds coy, a little like pity whoring, to call what I did cocky. On the other hand, $200 was a lot to lose at the time, especially for such a stupid plan. Not that I shouldn't be able to have whatever kind of goddamn plan I wanted without... Jesus, I'm sweating. I can't believe how pissed off I still am. But some betrayals, when you're young, feel like a big, fat metaphor. And if there's anything that will scar a late adolescent for whatever is left of their life, it's a metaphor. Okay, back up. So, Lucy, what was this big plan of yours? I warned you. It's dumb. I was finally going to become literate in the art form of the American era. The slimy vine that was strangling everything I loved. the movie film, the novel for dummies, because that's what regulation humans found impressive, and I wanted so badly to be a real person. I might have read The Velveteen Rabbit one too many times. It didn't matter that the tragically hip didn't know what an Octave Mirbeau or even a confederacy of dunces was. They were better than me because I had stupidly neglected to watch Godfather 2. If you're confused, no, I could not just stream the Godfather movies, nor download them. No more than poor, glorious Pee Wee Herman could have stayed out of trouble by enjoying his porn at home. Aside from the fact that life is short and art is long, and you can't take in everything, even if you strictly ingest only masterpieces, there was no such thing in 1995. There was a primitive internet, but a computer cost as much as I made in 6 months, and it took half an hour to load one picture of a boob. It was a ghost town populated by rich kid nerds. To watch movies, you had to buy 2 entire machines, neither of them a computer, but one of which was solely dedicated to movies, a VCR, or video cassette recorder, a name which made no sense because the VCR was only for watching. If you wanted to record a home movie, that was a third machine. You also needed a TV, which you would think I already had under control if you saw the mountain of televisions that loomed over our living room. But they were either too old to have a jack, or else Gooper had stripped out the jack because someone told him you could turn it into a crack pipe lighter. But finally, I had figured a way to only buy one machine to end my illiteracy and become like the others. Wisdom says you shouldn't gamble with money you can't afford to lose. Not that anyone in their right mind would have thought this was gambling, but nobody in their right mind would have had anything to do with my roommate, Paul. The Lucy of the future might not have a flying car, but she could tell you that Paul was transparently poison. To an adolescent, alas, he was a friend. He talked to me. Sometimes he was nice. He didn't try to trick me into having sex with him, and he wanted to make a punk house with me. Sure, by the time Brett and Leslie came around, I wanted to murder him most of the time, like everyone else who met Paul eventually felt. But I ignored my feeling. I wasn't capable of putting down a book before I finished it, even if I was dead bored, so why would I put aside a person? It's Byronic. It's tempting to see the making of a friend or the launch of a love affair as this big old glorious metaphor. It feels so big, you want to see the whole world through it. At least while it's going good, like any ideology. The danger should have been obvious. Most of us are fed a parade of movies. Books are guilty too. About love long before we have the hormones to fall in it. And to make a book or movie go, to thicken the sauce, you have to show people against the backdrop of their times, unless you're Beckett. It would be too much of a shame not to weave the ironies and tragedies of characters placed on the wheel of history in with their personal sentiments. If you think youth is a hell of a drug, try huffing meaning. It gets you so high you forget the facts. A relationship is you and that person. No more, no less. Not class warfare, not man against nature, not this always happens to me. There's a backdrop, sure, but don't confuse the decor for the play. But I always confuse the decor for the play. Otherwise, I'd have to either go back to beer or back to before beer, when I didn't know what feeling good felt like. I wasn't alone when I first cracked that perfect beer. All of the incognito mosquitoes had gathered amiably for a band breakfast tipple, and I found out what the boys' pressing business with J&J had been last night before our legendary cocktail party. They were going to include some of Brett's porn collages in their next art show in Manitowoc. I got the feeling they would have preferred to have this conversation with Brett without Leslie nosing in, but that was a 1 in a million chance. Being J&J, they had morphed directly, with no discussion, into their backup offer when Leslie started mewling with envy. They asked our whole band to play music at the show opening. That included me. I almost choked on my excitement. I had to stifle it so hard. Because this was mostly about Brett. Although Leslie would no doubt find a way to make it about Leslie. I wanted to pretend that at least one of us was decent. Yeah, I'm getting to my plan. But I had to tell you what made me cocky. We had a show. And I had a promotion at both my jobs now, maybe, if nothing went wrong. And I had met the closest things to a celebrity I cared about in our little world. And I was starting to think I needed a bit of life for myself, away from the suffocating, delusional slackerism of the house. Jesus Christ, one gig and this bitch wants to go solo. And so, even though I wasn't recovered from the Monty hangover, and now I had a grown-up cocktail party hangover to go with it, I was in a pretty good mood. Zippity-doo-dah, as the old folks used to say when the tornado missed us. I had my plan. I'd been simmering it for a while, but it was time to add the noodles. Yeah, alcohol is terrible. Beer is the worst drug. My mom's been telling me that since I could understand the words. She blamed alcohol for making her dad the way she was. She blamed alcohol for making her dad make her the way she was. And God knows, I wish she hadn't lied so much about everything else, because if I believed her about that, I wouldn't have had to learn it for myself. That beer, if you peeled back all the layers except that last couch of horror, was the best beverage of my life. Mind you, part of the reason it was so good was for the same reason a blanket, a mundane object if you touch it in June, becomes a friend and magical lover in January, because you need it so badly you're shivering and the ordinary blanket has the power to end the pain of cold. Granted, you don't generally inflict the overall existence of cold air on yourself like a dumbass, but if you drink enough beer that your body needs it, which all of us did, which is probably why we thought it was hilarious rather than a great way to die before you've lived, then it turns into the magical blanket version of a beer. I'm making this sound too good. You know why I remember this beer, though? Because that only happened once. Out of all the days I wasted drinking, there was only one where I took the first drink and found that the blanket feeling came down snugly over me at the same time as the beer feeling came. The rest of the time I was distracted by all the people around me, the assholes I was drinking to put up with, or the friends I was drinking to open up to. Otherwise I was trapped shut in myself like a sea clam. Or the cold was too terrible for the blanket to feel like anything but a dirty scrap. But that was the one time, the one golden morning, I could feel the drug spreading from the membranes in my stomach, out through all the tissues, more than merely the blood, relaxing my whole being like an intramuscular shot full of relief from being here. I don't know if it was J&J or the fact that suddenly Brett and Nigel were alternately being shockingly nice to each other and sitting there in chummy silence, with the sound knob on the TVs turned way down, watching only the art of the cartoons, not screaming at each other, and the morning was pregnant with peace instead of dread. Maybe it was the quality of the golden lemon light, but I held my pale, fizzy Huber up to it, the sun pouring through the watery brown glass as though I could drink the light, and I stupidly said to myself, this is why I drink. They really need to mandate statistics classes in high school. Anyway, my plan. My should have been so simple $200 5-year plan for movie literacy in the me demographic. I stopped by the bank on the way to Job 1 at the brew pub. I think there was maybe one ATM dispersing cash downtown, and we were kind of afraid of it. Jesus, I hate nostalgia. So what am I feeling? Every word I type makes me unspeakably sad. And not only because I had already known so much grief in my short life, and there was so much more to come, but also there was nobody I would trade with. It comes for everybody, and if you've been spoiled, I can only imagine you go crazy at the end. That's where all those stereotypes come from, right? The pretty blonde housewife who turns into a raging psychopath when she realizes her teenage daughter is now prettier than she. Well, this is her first problem. Good family, smart girl, between the wars, no tragedies, plenty of money, didn't even know what it was like to want something and not have it. Of course she's out of her skull. She's a 5-year-old going through menopause. If there are no right answers, why is there so much regret? Maybe because not only do you keep forgetting about Brett, Lucy, now you're taking a whole chapter to not even reveal what your dumb plan was. That's okay. The plan itself is pretty anticlimactic. So I found out I could get a combination TV VCR for $200. I saw it at some little store on the edge of town that was trying to be a cheaper version of Radio Shack. That's it. That was my plan. And yet I have as much right to breathe the air here and blow it back inwards as anybody. Just like that blonde lady. The fact that you couldn't get a TV or a VCR alone for a mere $200 didn't faze me. I wish I could tell you why. I also wish that were why it didn't work out. And that's the end of chapter 8, because I finally started learning to write chapters that are short enough for me to read before my voice gives out. So, I hope you're sleepy now. I hope you're curious for the next chapter, or for the previous chapters. If you are curious for the previous chapters and you haven't listened to them, you can go back and listen. If you're curious for the next 2 chapters, they are already printed on my Substack. And if you're curious for things I haven't written yet, I appreciate it, but please don't kidnap me. And I think there's a Stephen King novel about that, so at the risk of being a hypocrite about plagiarism, I will just choose to end things here. I'm sorry the cat has not made an appearance, but can't control the cat. That's why he's called